All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. And yeah, it's been not the best week. And my point in doing this show was I was always just going to be honest about my own personal struggles. And the idea of that wasn't just to be like a reality show, but also to force myself to be honest really with myself. And so that I can articulate just what's going on. The challenges this last week have been, it's just so hard, man. I got kids, and it's so hard for me to find the time to get the work done that I need to get done. And also, I had a great rhythm going on where I was forced to study my own games, and that gave me like a scaffolding of like, okay, I've got to do this X amount of time. And when I'm not on that schedule, it's easy for me to kind of like dilly-dally in different things and projects and whatever, you know. So that's definitely one of my major challenges. And the other thing that happened is I had a birthday, and that yeah, okay, so just I want to say, like, as an older dude, I will just say it is very hard to stay fit anyway. And then with the kids and stuff, like, I can't really have the same routine that I did, and so it's been hard to stay in shape and to eat right and all that. So I feel like I'm at my most out of shape right now. And the birthday's kind of interesting too, in that not only, let me just say about it, like, everybody who's a little bit older has some kind of physical complaint. So I'm not going to tell you that my complaints are any greater than the next person, but I just want to assure everybody they are real. Like, I have a separated shoulder and I've got other griefs, and it just makes it very hard to especially make progress physically. And in a way, that's a good metaphor for, I think, improving your chess too, because just in the same way, it's so hard to make any kind of physical improvement as an older dude. Let's say you want to run the mile faster, or you run a marathon at a certain time, whatever. It's the same thing where it's going to be incremental improvement, and then you're going to get injured, or you're going to fall off your training program because you got so much other things going on. It's similar with chess, and with chess, it's a little easier to deceive oneself, I think, because the cognitive decline isn't as evident as with the body. Like, and this, with the body, there are like clearly injuries and ailments that people get, and with your mind, it's just not something you can see or feel, even though you know it's happening, and you can see it. In the players around you too. Like, everybody's rating is going down, and we only have, I think, now 3 players in the 40 to 50 age group over 2,700 in the world, and Anand is like the star. The star at 50 plus, the one guy in that 2,700 group. In any case, I'm done talking about my physical ailments, and I want to talk more a little bit about the theme of the day, which is openings. And so the good thing that I've done with chess is that, as I said last time, I had to like evolve into talking or thinking about something new. And I got this cool book by Nikitin. It's got problems as a book. Let me just say, as a reader, like, problem number one, you don't have somebody translate the book from Russian to English that's not a native English speaker. So there's like grammatical problems. The book needed help. It needed someone to hold Nikitin's hand and be like, dude, this sentence is no good. You need to like rethink this, or something like that. In any case, it's been great in the sense that this guy was a witness to history with Kasparov, and the thing that I got out of it, well, I'm getting out of it, is that, Kasparov came up, is a little bit older than me, and really revolutionized chess and my understanding of it. And I didn't get it as a kid. Like, the way he was playing was something beyond both my ability and understanding, and I didn't have like a coach to tell me like, dude, this is what you need to pay attention to, and like these hangups that you have, you shouldn't have the hangups. And we didn't have computers back then, so it couldn't be like I couldn't turn on the computer on some weird sacrifice that dude did and then have it confirmed that actually it was it was actually a beautiful thing. So that's some of the things that's interesting for me to look at back on. And one thing that I think I share with Fischer is that I never understood the Karpov-Kasparov matches. And what I mean by that is like when I look at those games, I don't understand them. A lot of them like are these weird early draws, and a lot of them have moves that I'm just like, what is going on? And I think Fischer felt like, oh, this is like some kind of conspiracy. These games are so weird. But I think actually I'm the one with the problem, and I actually need to go back and understand some of those games, because while there's a couple famous ones that everyone's kind of aware of, and that like when people ask Kasparov, he'll like show his famous Rui game against Karpov. There's a lot of games in there where I'm just like, dude, I have no idea what you guys are doing or thinking in these games. And so, anyways, what am I saying? I'm saying that before I want to talk about openings, I just want to say that understanding Kasparov as both as a fan and as a player is, I think, a big part of what I need to do to improve my own chess. And let me use that as a segue to talk about openings, because I think Kasparov's openings were absolutely fantastic. And when I think about my own openings, which is something I have to do, this is by all means how Kasparov did it is really helpful. So first of all, I would never want to play what Kasparov played as openings as a kid, but I just want to say it made a lot of sense, especially as black. With black, what Kasparov did was he copied Fischer's opening repertoire. King's Indian against d4, Sicilian, usually the Najdorf, against e4. With the slight variation that he was playing more Scheveningen structures than Najdorf structures, depending on the line, i.e. E6 versus E5. And what I want to say about this is the thing that I want to say. First of all, I should say that I am different from most GMs, and I don't believe in the opening that much. I think there's other people that feel that way too, and that has a lot to do as well with just the way things have changed with Carlsen, the way the guy's been able to bob and weave his way through different openings and make it so that his opponents couldn't make the game about the opening. So then, of course, everybody becomes inspired to be like, oh, I can do that too, and I can play these different things. And so that no one's going to prep me, And one of the takeaways that I had from our last couple shows here was Friedel was on, GM Josh Friedel, and we were talking about playing what essentially became a Ruri structure, and there were certain things that he instantly was like, right, got it. And I had trouble with because it was a structure that I wasn't entirely familiar with. So that's just an interesting thing in itself. And one of the things that I got out of going over these games, especially the King's Indian games of the early Kasparov, is that it wasn't so much like the guy had everything figured out, but he had studied so many King's Indian games that he knew a lot of the ideas that would happen later. And, in different positions, in positions that aren't, let's say, theory, or positions that you've prepped out. And I think that's where a person truly can become dangerous. And I think, when I think about getting back to 2500, when I was doing well, I think I had an interesting repertoire of playing pretty solid conservative chess as white, going into a lot of endgames, and I was doing a lot of endgame study. And then with black, I was playing like the French and the Nimzo-Indian / Queen's Indian. And I had some ideas, and it wasn't, of course, like those were winning me monster games, like, or anything like that. But it's just the interesting thing about openings, right? Is it's the idea that you're going to get some kind of small edge against your opponent, and that edge is going to tell. Sometimes it tells just on the clock that the guy has to think more than you do. But the thing that I got out of the Kasparov games just now was like how important it is to study like a broad range of, let's call them classic games or GM games within the position that aren't theory. And what I mean by that is I think it's really good, and this is something I'm going to try to work on. That's why I'm telling it on the show here, to like force myself into a declaration of purpose that I need to go over the games in my opening repertoire in the same way I go over games, for myself. And I did this back in the day. I would print them out, and then I would have them on the board, and I would go through them, and I would see it with my own human eyes. That would allow me to remember things, but also I really want to stress that there's ideas that come later that are interesting. And also I feel like the computer is going to have different opinions. And when the new way of doing things, right, is you create a file. You look at what people have done, and then you create a little file for yourself, and the computer's going to tell you all kinds of weird things you would have never thought of in your own like wildest dreams, and then you're going to try to remember those weird ideas. And oftentimes, especially as an older dude, it's going to be really hard to remember the strange computer ideas, and it'll be hard to play with a sense of the position. And I think that's when, like I said, I think someone could be truly dangerous. So let me walk through a little bit of these two games, one in particular, and we'll talk about it. One actually interesting thing, No Rematch has a light square repertoire about, French and the Queen's Indian / Nimzo Indian, and that's a little bit true. But I think actually one way I would talk about it is that in the French, let's say with this structure, your pawns are pointing towards the queen side. So really it's a situation where, to me, the dynamic is you have to create enough drama on the queen side before you get mated. In the King's Indian, you have to mate white before he gets you with either space or an attack on the queen side. So, to my mind, that's actually the more salient fact, though the white square thing is certainly true and interesting. By the way, I'm going to plug a video I'm planning to do. Is it a joke video? I don't know. But one thing I realized, this has everything to do with openings, is that sometimes it's helpful to know less. So I'm coming up with a new opening. I'm going to call it the flamingo. This is it, the flamingo. It's a setup, and what it is really a setup you can do always against d4, c4. And this is the idea. Whatever the guy does, he can go knight f3, knight c3, g3. Whatever the dude does, you give him a check, you play, and then so the bishop will get traded off in some way of white's choosing. And then we're going to play d6, e5 to actually get a King's Indian structure and get this bishop out. And it works against everything. It's really remarkable. Let's say knight c3. I'm just going to choose one at random. There's so many different ways white can play here, right? Let's say this violence. Well, we can castle first, or we can play d6. Queen a4 doesn't win anything right away. We could take on c3 too. But I don't know, let's just say this. And the point is going to be that we play now with a good bishop on c8, and the dude is going to get our bishop on b4. He'll have the bishop advantage, but that's common in the Nimzo. Anyways, the point I'm trying to say is you could do this against everything, and then you don't actually need to learn anything. You will end up learning like interesting middle game ideas, learning where to put the pieces, absolutely, and maybe that's more substantive. Anyway, that's a plug for this video I'm going to do a little later. And it's kind of a joke to call it thing a flamingo, and Sam Shanklin says that all openings that are named after animals are bad. But the point I want to actually make is like so much of this opening study that people do, I feel like it gets lost in either a computerized sense or, you know, or yeah, not having a sense of where the pieces go. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that here. So this was fascinating to look at just when I did it, because on the dojo we have a training session every Sunday. This week it's going to be Saturday. Anyways, we had 2 games with the knight GE2 system. So with this thing, and the game we're going to go over now could transpose to that. Very interesting system, a lot of dynamic play here. And the first thing we should see is that normally black castles, because that's what King's Indian players do, they're kind of like automatons. They're automatons, and they just always do what they always do. But Kasparov had some ideas about delaying castling. By the way, in the game, I did a video called "What is the story of this position with the knight e2, King's Indian," and we looked at this position. Truly fascinating, very interesting with takes h5, and then already a big decision for white here. Yeah, really interesting stuff. Anyway, let me go back to the game. So dude plays a6, and this is something that was around at the time, but wasn't that well established. And Kasparov really brought it to a new level. And we should say, I want to say that Kasparov, the way he played the King's Indian was dramatically different from the way Fischer played the King's Indian. And this game, by the way, I think is 77, maybe late 76. So the amazing thing there is really we're still in Fischer land, you know. Anyways, let's look. Rook b8. There's so many different things to do. I covered a game on the training session where it went castles, queen d2, and then this very strange move to me, knight a5. And this was like 220, 200 players. And of course, I hadn't seen this move before. The idea being that if knight g3, that we're going to claim compensation here, I guess. And then if knight c1, yeah, then things are going to get weird with e5. That's, yeah, so that's just its own interesting thing. So here we go, rook b8. This makes more sense to me, rook b8. Now dude plays knight c1. And it's obviously a little weird that the knight is jumping around doing weird things. The knight g3 move, I feel, is something, you know, more aggressive players are keen on doing. It's a very difficult position for white to play, I feel, because he is playing really for space, but he doesn't know where to put the knight. And he doesn't know where, a lot of pieces he doesn't know. The bishop on f1, a lot of times you don't know where that guy's going to go. Okay, so let's check it out. e5, d5, and now knight d4. Really interesting play. And what's fun about this, and one of the reasons I really wanted to stress it, is while it's certain that Kasparov had kind of looked at this before the game. I mean, he's like 12, 13 years old here, right? he didn't have the computer. And the computer will tell you that black is in bad shape after knight d4. But I want to say for myself, let's look at what happens. So snip, snip, castles, and we're threatening knight e4. Right? So knight e4, queen e4, rook e8. White goes back, and now c5. a4. And black plays knight h5. I'm just going to assume that maybe he had seen positions similar to this, but wasn't totally aware. And the beauty of this, right, is like when I look at this, I mean, without the computer, this is important. When I look at this without the computer, my sense is that black has full compensation. I see an incredible unopposed bishop. I see that white's king is weaker. I see this knight needs some work. I see that this bishop is poor and that he lost his, by far his best minor piece, which is the dark square bishop. And the reason I bring it up with the computer is that once you look at what the computer says, you can't go back. It will tell you something, and then you'll never be able to unsee it. You know. So here it says that white is something like a clear pawn better. At certain positions, I think it says it's more than a pawn. I might even turn it on here during the show just so we can, you know, have a little fun with it. Little background. So the Soviets had this cool tradition where they would play clock simuls. And so, you know, the GM, in this case, was Korchnoi. Actually, I need to flip the board or else it's not going to match my little pictures. In this case, it was Korchnoi. Would play by something like, imagine 6 players, and he would have X amount of time on the clock, and they would also have the same amount of time of clock. And I think it's a great tradition. Gary then played several clock simuls, like he destroyed the Israeli team. I think it was something ridiculous like 6-0, you know. So they, you know, he had to just walk around to all these boards of these super GMs, and he was able to knock him out. Anyways, I think it's a great tradition, and I kind of wish we could do more of it. Anyway, so Korchnoi, you know, famous for taking pawns, and here he's taking a pawn, and let's look at how it goes. So g4, and now a really interesting decision. Well, g4, first of all, very enterprising, and there's just some real questions going on with the white king, and he's going to have to say that white is going to have to say that he has got a shell for the king. And after black's next move, it's really an amazing decision that Korchnoi makes here. The computer, because I looked at it, thinks it's second best, but as a human, I think it's fantastic, and that is to play king d1. Fantastic chess. So now the knight has to go back to f6 and doesn't get to play knight f4. And this is the kind of thing, like, if you study this without the computer, well, I think you're going to say to yourself, I have compensation at least, right? Let's look at this briefly. I might turn on the computer, might not. Anyways, so the notion would have been something like this. Queen f2, queen takes, king takes, knight f4, knight d3, and then g5 to say I own the dark squares. And you can check at some point we're going to check, right, on d4. So to my human eyes, I think it looks real fun. I think it looks like a fun position for black. I'll turn on the beast. I'll turn on this beast here, and let's just see how it destroys me. So, right, this makes sense. h4, that's definitely a plus to him. h6, it's got all kinds of moves. Like, now it wants knight f4 and king e2. Like, of course, I wouldn't have thought about this in my wildest dreams. The narrative, if you were human, I guess, would be to say something like, I'm better not just because the pawns, but because the white square pawns provide a wall against this bishop here. And that someday, someday, this bishop will get to trade itself off. Maybe something like bishop h3 and then g5. Also some kind of claim that that we've got a grip on the queen side. And right, this is a clear example of what I mean by the computer. You turn the computer on here, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, that thing I saw with my human eyes, that's just not true. Well, imagine, I mean, even though it's a clock simul, you're playing Korchnoi. He actually plays what I think is the better human move, because now the knight has to go back to f6. But I would still say, you know, I think Black's position is very rich. I'm not really sure. Yeah, if I was just playing this as a person, I would say this is great fun. I'm enjoying this a lot. This is great. Okay, Queen e1. That was the point, and Black has to take. And now knight d7. And so here's this interesting position, and this is the kind of thing that when I think or imagine playing openings well, it's being able to both get this kind of position and then believe in it. So the computer, again, by the way, says that white's much, much better. And again, I just see that dark square bishop, and I think we're doing great. Bishop e2, knight e5. And here a point I want to make is that in this position, I played over this game several times just with the board. I didn't look at the computer, I was just, looking at the book with my own wooden set. And it wasn't really clear to me when white made his mistake. And Nikitin, who had annotated the game without using any kind of computer analysis, didn't remark on this move either. So the interesting thing about computer analysis, right, is that no human found what should be done here, and didn't realize that white's next move was actually a mistake. So white played, to me, when I saw this move, I thought at least, looked good to me. Rook g1 made a lot of sense to me. You want to stop. We're not going to stop f5. You're going to make it a little bit more difficult. It certainly looks correct. Whereas the computer is just like, I think it wanted h3. And then again, I couldn't unsee it. And the idea is just that he wants to pop me with f4. Let's again, I'll play against the computer a little bit. You could go g5 would be one human instinct, and bishop h6 would be the other one. Honestly, I look at this and I'm like, I don't really see the problem. Let's say h4, sure. I'm going to put the bishop somewhere in the position. I guess I could play f6 too. Yeah. I wouldn't know that I'm necessarily worse here, especially after some move like bishop e3. The claim for white and the computer is something like I'm going to be able to run your bishop off of those beautiful dark squares. Whether if you go to d4, I'm going to have knight b3 to mess with you. If you go somewhere else, let's say on f4, then I'm going to do it once it's not immediately obvious to me with my human eyes that black is worse here. And the computer's just like, no, bro, you're down like a pawn. You're down like a pawn. So, and let me say, so the interesting thing is, if you analyze these positions without the computer, and you're just going off of your human feel, you might end up saying to yourself, this is bad. But if you don't understand why it's bad from a human perspective, your opponent isn't going to get it either. And so here, Korchnoi makes a mistake with rook g1. Kind of hard to imagine why it's so bad. But after f5, black's getting the activity he wanted. And g5, I didn't, I was like, I don't know. Bishop d7. White has to make some kind of move, and it turns out, I guess, even this is okay, but look, now what does Gary do? Bam! And then all of a sudden we've got drama, because you can't take everything because the knight takes f3. Boom, bishop b5. So I'm going to link to that game in the description. I also did a guess the move, which is, I shouldn't say guess the move. I'm just doing this series called Test Your Chess for a position that happens later in this game that you can see on our ChessDojo web channel. My idea, by the way, for that is pretty basic. There was a book that came out early 2000s called Perfect Your Chess, and it was by Grabinsky and Volokitin. And Grabinsky was like this Ukrainian trainer, and I always wanted them to do another book. I think a lot of other strong players wanted to do it too. The interesting thing about it is in contrast to like other books where you had positions where like it's like find the best move or something, or puzzles that you do online. These were very rich positions taken from actual games where there was a best move, but it's kind of like the best moves that I give in these positions. There's a best move, but it's not necessarily like white's winning, or it's clear like what's going on. It's just that it was much better than the others, and there's like some deeper ideas behind it. Maybe it's an intuitive idea, maybe it has to do with calculation, maybe it's some deep positional understanding. And honestly, to me, that's my experience of real chess, and the beauty of real chess is that you don't have some clear-cut thing. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing with that show. 2,000 plus means GM. No, 2,500 I think means GM, 2,500 FIDE. And then it's a little bit more difficult after that, but that's a different story. Let me show you another game that was similar to this. I'm going to flip this. And likewise, he waited, castling. And now this move, rook b1, which I found. So this is Laputian, who was a kid at the time. It was like a junior thing in the Soviet Union. And rook b1 seemed really strange to me, but it made sense insofar as white's going to try to really expand on the queen side here with b4. It felt kind of flimsy. I'm certain that this wasn't prepped by Kasparov. Knight d4, beautiful move. It's typical. Now let me just say the obvious. Not only at this point would you be giving the bishop, but knight e4 would be the end of the world. So on knight ge2, there's a very basic question. If you take on e2, then bishop e2, and it looks to me that in spite of the fact that you have traded off a piece, which we usually want to do when we're playing a cramped position, you did just develop the bishop on e2, and dude is really set to grind you on the queen side, plus this b6 square is kind of funny. And we had a structure that was surprisingly similar in a game that we covered on the ChessDojo training the last time. And I think that's still available on Twitch if you wanted to rewatch that. So instead, black comes with a beautiful idea. c5 takes, and he allows this to happen. And like the Korchnoi game, the compensation is not immediately clear. It's a position where you'd really have to believe in it. And rook e8 was played, and I'll leave it here because I think in this position Kasparov saw an incredible distance, and I'm gonna want to spoil it for those of you who go and watch the Test Your Chess video on this position, which I just put out today. So there's two of them, and we're gonna. I organize it in this way that maybe is a little weird in that I did do it like a test, so you can compare yourself to other players, and I just wanted that to be a cool feature of the series. But mostly, I'm trying to capture what I got out of Perfect Your Chess, which was decisions made on the chessboard that showed some really incredibly deep understanding. And like when you meditate on them, and the idea with Perfect Your Chess, I think the way it works best is, you just do a couple positions a day and you kind of fall into it. And of course, you're trying to like find the move. No doubt it's like a competitive game in that way. But the end result is like, oh, right, this is like a deep middle game or end game idea that I can maybe use and also like be able to have the calculating ability to find, and that calculating ability is one of the main things I need to work on. Everybody does. Kostya's doing his training sessions really just with calculation exercise for the most part, which is different than I do, but it's indicative of where he thinks, and I think a lot of other people think, the best route to success is going to be had is doing those kind of deep calculation exercises. Anyways, I'm trying to help. I'm trying to help the chess community out by putting these test your chess videos out that are kind of like building on the idea of perfect your chess. And I want to note to that is that at 5, Kostya is going to come on and take my test live on air. He did the first test, got 3 out of 4. And the second test is coming up today in like 20 minutes. So you can stay on the air and watch that. Let me talk a little bit about openings. So the question becomes for me, and this is something I'm going to need to get into, is like, what openings do I want to focus on and how do I want to do it? As you saw, the last board game I played, I correctly predicted what my opponent was going to do against the Philidor of all things, and I got the position I wanted. I really did got the position I wanted, and I knew he had prepped me out in some kind of French thing, and I just didn't want to face it. So that was a reasonable thing to do, and I want that kind of flexibility to have, the ability to change it up depending on what my opponent does, and to also avoid just getting caught in some prep, because not only is it a good competitive thing not to get caught in prep, but it's just more fun when you don't. That said, I do want to work on specific openings and figuring them out, and I think what I'm leaning toward is I've got this repertoire, first with white, where I want to play, first of all, the most aggressive way here with knight c3, just because it saves me a lot of grief. It does allow bishop b4, and as Larry Christensen said, after bishop b4, black is equal. I really do believe that after having played this myself many times. But it's a very rich, strategical game, and white is the person who now gets to decide which road the game goes down on. But other than that, I think I'm leaning towards going back to where I was best, which was playing endgame variations. So against the King's Indian, let's hurt them. I'm tired of them doing this everything mating me business. No, I'm going to take that pawn, buddy. I'm going to take that pawn. And this is an example of a position that, funny actually with the computer, back in the day the computer was like white is winning. And now the computer, after you let it run a while, it says maybe white's a touch better, but essentially equal. But it's the kind of thing where there really are a lot of dark secrets to this, and both sides will make mistakes, so it will come into a very rich middle game. It's my hope anyway. there's other ideas too. There's a lot of things, and I have going over these Kasparov games. I have a little bit of King's Indian envy, and so even this variation is meant to kill kill the spirit of these dirty King's Indian players and all of their dirty moves that they do to me. All right. But endgame variations all the way. Like one I really need work on is in the Grunfeld. I want to be a real jerk and do this thing where you often get an endgame like this, and you're going to play. Oftentimes it goes, for example, Queen D2, Queen A5, and then something like this. And there's a variety of ways in which this can go down. And white has a small tug. Well, like I said, a variety of ways it can go down. And I need to learn on a human level how to play these positions. When you turn the computer on, it gets so weird. And like, I think the problem I have is my instinct is to like look on ChessBase and make my little file and then turn the computer on. And then I won't remember any of that stuff. And also, I just won't have a deeper understanding of some of the things that I'm trying to do in the position. And with black, I really think I got to get my French online. There's things about it I don't understand. It seems weird, too, to be looking at openings in a deep way when I don't even know when I'm going to be able to play next. But I think this is the time for me right now to get inside a lot of these positions in a kind of deep middle game way, by going over the games, not just in some theoretical sense, but getting a deeper sense of the positions. One position that I'm interested in playing too are in these Queen's Indian positions. There's a variety of ways it can go down, but the positions where you get a structure like this I find really fascinating. As a kid, I was prejudiced against it because I had read terrible books about pawn structure, and those books set me back remarkably. And of course, in some technical sense, black has a weakened pawn structure, but it's a dynamic weakness. And this is one too where I need not just to turn on the computer, but like I need to look at some GM level games and really go deep in terms of understanding how the dynamics of the position works. Hostpud, thank you for the props and the tactics video. And I'm working on those things. So if people can help me out, if people are into it helps me do them. They've been mostly enjoyable to watch. And No Rematch says, out of the opening into the endgame, Edmar Mendes. I didn't have a coach as a kid. I grew up in New Mexico, but I was able to do this thing called the U.S. Chess School. It was not run by Greg Shahada back then. It was this really cool thing where they brought us to the Marshall Chess Club for like a week, once a year, and I got to go twice, and Mendes was the teacher. Yeah, that was like a really important part of my chess development. Back then, it's so different now that kids have access to players talking. Like back then, it was just annotations and not that many words. And if you can hear someone talking about a position, and especially when they admit that they don't know something, or this is just my sense of the position, because that's something you don't get in books, honestly. You just have, like, some dude says, well, it's unclear, or this is that. You don't get like a personal relationship with a position that you get when you talk to somebody. And that's what I got out of Madness. And, of course, I had New York City envy. I think all of us did at that time. And just a hilarious note on that is, like, talked to Joel Benjamin last year, and he was like, oh, it was so dumb growing up in Brooklyn. I was like, bro, you don't have any idea the gift you had been given growing up in Brooklyn. Oh, that's cool. This bishop e3 line, we're talking, I assume, about the Grunfeld, was featured in the Madness book. And I had read that book, but I actually had forgotten that. Well, I'm glad to hear that my stream is mentally relaxing. I hope so. All right, I'm going to leave it there. In 10 minutes, Kostya's going to come on and take this test. I watched him take the test last time I put out the first video of the Kasparov series. It was very mentally relaxing for me to watch it. And just fun to see people, him in particular, struggle with these positions. And yeah, I'm trying to create the experience that I want as a consumer, really, is I want some interesting positions that I'm not just testing myself, but like I'm kind of expanding my chess horizons. All right, so I'll be back next week. I'll have some more videos out on the dojo site. And thanks for being part of this little process. You know, again, for me, it's like I need this show to keep myself honest with my own chess progress and the things I'm doing. And I know I would just leave it if I didn't have to report to the internet every Wednesday on what I was doing. All right, bye-bye.